The Unburdening of Elara Vance. Story based from the book of Micah 7 verse 18. Praises God for his incomparable nature, highlighting his ability to pardon iniquity, forgive transgressions, and show mercy rather than staying angry forever. The old house groaned under the weight of autumn, much like Elara Vance's soul. Rain lashed against the ancient window panes of her grandmother's study, mimicking the relentless storm that had raged inside her for a decade. She traced the dust motes dancing in the weak lamplight, each particle a tiny shimmering accusation. 10 years since she'd fled Willow Creek, leaving behind shattered trust and whispered condemnations. 10 years since the ambition that had once been her driving force had twisted into a corrosive acid, eating away at her from the inside. She was an artist, or once had been. Her hands, once agile and expressive, now felt heavy, numb. She'd come back to Willow Creek not for solace, but because she had nowhere left to run. Her successful, glittering city life had crumbled, revealing the rotten foundation beneath. Guilt. The specific transgression wasn't one grand dramatic act, but a series of calculated compromises that had ultimately betrayed her family's legacy and, inadvertently, the small, struggling town she swore she'd save with her grand visions. A shady deal, a misrepresentation, a pursuit of fame over integrity. The repercussions had been subtle, insidious, but devastating to the quiet, trusting people of Willow Creek. She hadn't stolen money, but she had stolen hope, and that, she realized now, was far worse. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind seemed to carry the voices of her past. Her grandmother's gentle disappointment, her childhood friend's tearful accusation, the silent judging stares of the townsfolk. She had tried everything to silence them. Work, travel, even a brief, ill-fated attempt at philanthropy that felt utterly hollow. Nothing worked. The shame clung to her like a shroud woven from thorns, pricking her with every breath. One evening, buried beneath a landslide of old sketchbooks and dried paint tubes, her hand brushed against something unexpected. A leather-bound book, small and worn, tucked away in the bottom drawer of her grandmother's desk. Her grandmother, Clara, a woman of deep, quiet faith, had always kept her Bible close. Elara had dismissed it as quaint, a relic of a bygone era. Now, she held it like a foreign object, the scent of aged paper and dried roses clinging to its pages. She flipped through it, not out of devotion, but morbid curiosity. Clara's neat, spidery handwriting occasionally marked a verse, a date. Then, her gaze snagged on a passage in the book of Micah, highlighted with a faint, almost invisible line. Who is a God like you, who pardons sin and forgives the transgressions of the remnant of his inheritance? You do not stay angry forever but delight to show mercy. Micah 7 verse 18. Elara read it once. Then again. And again. The words were a stark contrast to the relentless anger she felt from herself, from the imagined judgment of God. Delight to show mercy? It sounded like a fantasy, a cruel joke. Her God, the God she imagined, was surely a formidable judge, stern and righteous, demanding penance she could never fully pay. She scoffed, tossing the Bible onto the desk. Mercy? She didn't deserve mercy. She deserved the perpetual ache in her chest, the sleepless nights, the artistic paralysis. It was her penance, her burden. Yet, the words had planted a seed, tiny and persistent. Over the next few days, they echoed in her mind. When she tried to sketch, her hand faltered, but the verse pulsed behind her eyelids. When the rain finally ceased and a fragile sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the riotous, overgrown garden, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't experienced in years, a tentative question. Could it be true? Could there be a God who delighted in mercy, rather than reluctantly granting it? A God who didn't stay angry forever, unlike the one she carried in her heart? One freezing dawn, unable to sleep, she stumbled out of bed, drawn to her grandmother's study. The house was utterly silent. She picked up the Bible again, her fingers tingling as if tracing ancient power. She found Micah 7 verse 18 and read it aloud, her voice raspy, unfamiliar in the quiet. Who is a God like you, who pardons sin and forgives? You do not stay angry forever, but delight to show mercy. As she spoke the last words, something shifted within her. It wasn't a crack of thunder or a blinding light. It was quieter, more profound. It was like a dam breaking, but instead of a destructive torrent, it was a release of pressure, a softening of rigid, calcified pain. Tears, hot and unstoppable, streamed down her face. Not tears of despair, but of a strange burgeoning hope. She sank to her knees, the cold floor biting at her skin, but she barely felt it. For the first time, she didn't try to justify, to explain, to bargain. She simply broke. "Oh God," she choked out, the words ripped from the depths of her being. "If that's true, if you are truly like that, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. For not trusting you. For pushing you away. For hurting those I loved. Please, please show me your mercy." And then it happened. Not a voice from the heavens, not an angelic chorus, but a sensation so real, so undeniable, it stole her breath. A profound, enveloping warmth, like the most perfect, comforting embrace, settled around her. It wasn't physical, yet it was more tangible than any touch she'd ever known. It permeated her bones, calmed her racing heart, and most miraculously, lifted the crushing weight from her shoulders. The shame, the guilt, the self-loathing, they didn't vanish entirely, not yet, but they receded, drawing back like a tide exposing the sand. In their place, a deep, pervasive peace bloomed within her chest, a peace that defied all logic, all reason. It was as if the very air in the room had changed, filled with an invisible, benevolent presence. God was real. Not a distant concept, not a disapproving judge, but a living, breathing, loving presence. He wasn't just pardoning her sin. He was delighting to do so. He wasn't just forgiving. He was welcoming her home with open arms. In that moment, Elara knew. The reality of God wasn't in grand miracles or dramatic interventions, but in this intimate, unconditional encounter. It was in the quiet whisper of a forgotten verse, in the raw vulnerability of a broken prayer, in the unearned, overwhelming sense of belonging. She stayed there on the floor for a long time, bathed in that inexplicable peace. When she finally rose, the sun was painting the eastern sky in hues of rose and gold. The rain-washed garden outside her window glistened, each drop on the leaves reflecting the light like a tiny prism. Elara walked to the window. Her hands, once numb, now felt alive, tingling with a nascent warmth. She looked at the world with new eyes, not through the lens of her own failure, but through the lens of God's boundless mercy. Her journey wasn't over. Reconciliation with the town, with herself, would be a long, humble road. But the first most crucial step had been taken. She had met a God who delighted in mercy, and in doing so, she had met herself, truly, for the first time. The silence of the old house no longer echoed with accusations, but with the quiet, profound truth of Micah 7 verse 18, a truth that had become as real and solid as the ground beneath her feet. And in that truth, Elara Vance found at last, not just forgiveness, but the unexpected, exhilarating delight of being truly seen, truly loved, and truly free.